The Airbus A380, the largest passenger airliner ever built, looms over the tarmac like a behemoth of modern engineering. Its sheer size defies comprehension until placed in the context of the tiny figures scurrying beneath its wings. Ground, crew, engineers and passengers, all dwarfed by the machine's staggering dimensions. The aircraft's wingspan stretches an astonishing 79.8 meters, wider than the length of an Olympic swimming pool. If laid flat on the ground, it would eclipse nearly two-thirds of a football field. Standing beside one of its four massive Rolls-Royce Trent 900 engines, a human appears no taller than the diameter of the engine's fan blades, each spinning with enough force to suck in air at a rate that could empty an average living room. In seconds, the A380's fuselage rises over 24 meters into the air, taller than a 7-story building, with its tail fin alone reaching the height of a 5-meter giraffe stacked atop another. The nose, sleek and commanding, towers above the boarding ramps, where passengers file in like ants entering a cavernous metal hive. The aircraft's double-decker design accommodates up to 853 passengers in an all-economy configuration, a number that, if gathered on the ground, would form a small crowd. Yet inside the A380, they are swallowed by its vast interior, moving through aisles that seem to stretch endlessly, past rows of seats arranged like a meticulously planned cityscape. The landing gear, a complex network of 22 wheels, bears the weight of this airborne colossus. Each tire is nearly as tall as a person's waist, designed to withstand the crushing load of an aircraft that tips the scales at 560,000 kilograms when fully fueled and loaded. The act of refueling is another spectacle. The A380 can hold up to 320,000 litres of jet fuel, enough to fill more than 1,600 average car gas tanks. The fueling trucks, themselves sizable vehicles, look like toys next to the aircraft's cavernous fuel tanks, their hoses snaking into ports that seem built for giants. Even in motion, the A380's scale remains awe-inspiring. As it taxis, the ground trembles faintly beneath its mass, a sensation akin to standing near a slow-moving building. The takeoff roll is a study in controlled power, the 4 engines generating a combined thrust of over 1.2 million pounds, enough to propel the aircraft from a standstill to nearly 300 kilometers per hour in less than a minute. Watching from the ground, one can't help but marvel at the physics-defying reality of something so immense, lifting effortlessly into the sky, shrinking gradually until it becomes just another speck against the vastness of the clouds. Inside the cabin, the human experience is one of paradoxical intimacy and grandeur. The upper deck, reserved for premium passengers, offers a vantage point akin to sitting in the mezzanine of a grand theatre, with windows framing views that make even passing clouds seem miniature. Below, the main deck stretches like an elongated subway car, yet with ceilings high enough to prevent any sense of claustrophobia. Walking its length feels like traversing a small street, past galleys where flight attendants prepare thousands of meals, past lavatories that, despite their compactness, are still larger than those on most other aircraft. The cargo holds beneath the passenger decks add yet another layer to the A380's enormity. Here, luggage, freight, and sometimes even vehicles are stored in compartments so vast they could house multiple shipping containers. The loading process is a ballet of efficiency, with cargo handlers driving specialized loaders deep into the belly of the plane, stacking suitcases and pallets with military precision. The total cargo capacity exceeds 175 cubic meters, a space that could easily accommodate several small houses. And then there are the wings, broad, sweeping structures that seem almost too large to be real. Each wing, if detached and laid on the ground, would cover an area larger than a tennis court. The curvature of their surfaces is designed to manipulate air currents with near-magical efficiency, generating lift with minimal resistance. Standing. Beneath one, a person is struck by the impossibility of such thin structures supporting so much weight, yet they flex ever so slightly in flight, bending like the branches of a tree in the wind, a testament to the delicate balance of strength and flexibility. The A380's size is not just a matter of statistics, it reshapes the environment around it. Airports worldwide have had to adapt to accommodate it, widening runways, reinforcing taxiways, and constructing specialized gates with multiple jet bridges to handle the influx of passengers. The boarding process alone is a logistical marvel, with streams of people funneling through separate entry points for the upper and lower decks, their movements orchestrated to prevent bottlenecks. Yet, for all its grandeur, the A380's era as the undisputed king of the skies is waning. Airlines increasingly favor smaller, more fuel-efficient twin-engine jets, leaving the A380 a rare sight outside a handful of major hubs. Its decline makes the experience of standing near one all the more poignant, a fleeting glimpse into an age when aviation's ambition knew no bounds. To witness an A380 up close is to understand the extremes of human ingenuity, a machine so vast it redefines the meaning of scale. It is a triumph of engineering, a flying city, a monument to what is possible when thousands of minds collaborate to conquer the skies. And yet, beside it, a single human stands as a reminder of both the brilliance that built it and the humility of being so small in the face of such grandeur. The Airbus A380 does not merely exist, it dominates. Every component, from its cavernous fuselage to its sprawling wings, is a testament to the extremes of modern aviation engineering. To truly grasp its scale, one must dissect it piece by piece, comparing each element to the human form, revealing just how much this machine dwarfs the people who designed, built, and now operate it. The fuselage, a skyscraper on its side. The A380's fuselage stretches 72.7 meters from nose to tail, longer than 3 blue whales laid end to end. If stood upright, it would rival a 25-story building, its aluminum skin gleaming under the sun like the facade of a futuristic tower. The diameter of its main cabin measures 7.14 meters, wide enough to fit 2 double-decker buses side by side, with room to spare. Walking its length is an exercise in endurance, as passengers traverse nearly the same distance as an Olympic sprint track's straight section just to reach their seats. Inside, the double-deck layout creates an illusion of normalcy, but the numbers betray the truth. The upper deck, running almost the entire length of the aircraft, is longer than 5 average city buses lined up. The staircases connecting the 2 levels are wide enough for 2 people to pass comfortably, their steps designed to accommodate. Hurried boarding, yet they feel like climbing between floors of a building rather than sections of a plane. The wings, a city block in the sky. The A380's wings are not just appendages. They are vast, freestanding structures that could each house a small apartment. With a surface area of 845 square meters, a single wing could blanket 2 professional basketball courts. The leading edge, where the wing meets the oncoming air, is taller than a person, its curvature designed to slice through the atmosphere. With minimal resistance, the wing's flexibility is another marvel. In flight, the tips can bend upwards by as much as 4 meters, absorbing turbulence like a suspension system. Watching from a window seat, this movement is barely perceptible, but on the ground, engineers inspecting the wings must use hydraulic platforms to reach their highest points, their tools looking like children's toys against the sheer breadth of the structure. The engines, swallowing a human, whole, each of the A380's 4 engines is a masterpiece of propulsion capable of generating 70,000 pounds of thrust, enough to lift 70 family cars off the ground simultaneously. The diameter of the engine intake measures nearly 3 meters, wide enough for a tall adult to stand inside without ducking. The fan blades, made of ultra-lightweight titanium, spin at speeds that would reduce any foreign object to dust in milliseconds. During maintenance, engineers often pose for photos inside the engine cowling, their bodies framed by the monstrous machinery. The contrast is jarring, a human barely filling a fraction of the space, dwarfed by the intricate lattice of compressors, turbines, and ducts that will soon propel hundreds of tons of metal and flesh through the stratosphere. The landing gear, a rolling industrial complex. The A380 does not land. It is caught by the Earth. Its landing gear, a sprawling network of 22 wheels, is more akin to the undercarriage of a spacecraft than a conventional airliner. The nose gear alone stands taller than a person. Its twin wheels, each nearly as wide as a bicycle, is long. The main gear, arranged in a complex 4-post configuration, spreads the aircraft's weight so efficiently that the pressure exerted on the runway is less than that of a fully loaded tractor-trailer. When extended, the landing gear lowers with a series of hydraulic hisses, the sound of a giant settling onto its feet. Ground crews working beneath it must crane their necks to inspect the brakes, each one larger than a dinner plate, capable of dissipating enough heat to melt steel if not for advanced cooling systems. The tail fin, a 5-story rudder, the vertical stabilizer or tail fin of the A380 rises 24.1 meters into the air, taller than most streetlights and nearly as high as the Arc de Triomphe. Its surface area is large enough to act as a billboard, though no airline has dared to paint it as such. The rudder, which helps steer the aircraft in flight, moves with such precision that its adjustments are imperceptible to passengers, yet its sheer size means even a slight deflection alters the course of hundreds of tons of aircraft. The human element, servicing the beast maintaining an A380, is a task of Herculean proportions. A full inspection requires dozens of technicians, their movements synchronized like a well-rehearsed ballet. Fueling the aircraft takes over an hour, with tanker trucks queuing like worker ants feeding a queen. Cleaning the cabin is another monumental effort. Imagine vacuuming a mansion while it's suspended in mid-air, with hundreds of seats, aisles, and galley kitchens to attend to. Even boarding is a spectacle. With up to 853 passengers to load, airlines use multiple jet bridges simultaneously, their accordion-like tunnels extending like the tendrils of some mechanical creature. From a distance, the process looks like a colony of insects tending to their nest, each passenger a tiny figure against the aircraft's overwhelming bulk, a fading titan. Despite its grandeur, the A380's reign as the queen of the skies is nearing its end. Airlines increasingly favor smaller, more efficient jets, leaving these giants to operate only on the busiest routes. Walking through an empty A380 hangar, one can't help but feel a sense of melancholy. These are the cathedrals of a fading era built for an age when aviation was as much about awe as it was about efficiency. Yet, for those who have stood beneath its wings, who have marveled at its engines, or who have simply gazed up at its tail fin from the tarmac, the A380 remains an unforgettable testament to human ambition. It is a machine that makes even the tallest among us feel insignificant, a reminder that the sky was never meant to be conquered by the small, but by the giants we dared to build. The true marvel of the Airbus A380 reveals itself not just in its exterior dimensions, but in the carefully orchestrated microcosm that exists within its aluminum shell. Step inside, and the aircraft transforms from a feat of engineering into a bustling temporary city, a pressurized metropolis cruising at 35,000 feet, where hundreds of lives intersect in a carefully regulated dance of space, movement, and human ingenuity. Boarding, the Great Migration. The process of filling an A380 is an exercise in controlled chaos. Picture a small-town population, equivalent to the entire seating capacity of a sold-out Broadway theater, streaming through multiple jet bridges in perfect synchronization. The upper deck boards separately from the lower, creating two distinct flows of humanity, each passenger carrying their own miniature world in the form of carry-on luggage, personal items, and the occasional oversized duty-free shopping bag. The aisles, though wider than those of smaller aircraft, still impose a strict hierarchy of movement. Passengers shuffle forward in a slow procession, their eyes scanning seat numbers, their bodies contorting to avoid brushing against their neighbors. The overhead bins, each large enough to swallow a full-size suitcase with room to spare, fill rapidly, creating a Tetris-like puzzle for flight attendants who must mediate disputes over precious storage real estate. The cabin, a vertical city. The A380's double-decker design creates two distinct atmospheres. The upper deck, typically reserved for premium passengers, has the hushed ambience of an exclusive members club. With fewer seats and more spacious configurations, it offers a rare commodity in modern air travel: privacy. The curvature of the fuselage creates intimate nooks where passengers can almost forget they are sharing the aircraft with hundreds of others. Below, the main deck is a study in organized density. In an all-economy configuration, the cabin stretches like an endless corridor, row after row of seats, forming a geometric pattern that disappears into the distance. Walking its full length feels like traversing a city block, passing through distinct neighborhoods, the forward section with its subtle prestige, the middle where families cluster together, and the rear, where the galley's constant activity creates a sense of barely contained energy. The galleys, industrial kitchens in the sky feeding, an A380's population is no small feat. The aircraft's galleys are compact industrial kitchens where flight attendants work with the precision of Michelin-starred chefs operating in a submarine. Meals are prepared in staggered sequences, timed to the minute, with ovens humming and carts loaded with hundreds of identical trays. The logistics are staggering: thousands of individual meals, each packaged, heated, and served in a window of just hours. The beverage carts, too, are monuments to volume. Stocked with hundreds of cans, miniature bottles, and stacks of plastic cups, they roll down the aisles like mobile convenience stores, their contents disappearing at an alarming rate. A single round of drinks for the entire aircraft can require pouring enough liquid to fill multiple bathtubs. The lavatories, oases of solitude. Even the most mundane elements of the A380 are scaled up. The lavatories, though still cramped by ground standards, are noticeably roomier than those on smaller aircraft. Some configurations even include a pair of restrooms with fold-down changing tables, large enough to accommodate an infant comfortably. A rarity in aviation. During peak hours, queues form in the aisles, creating impromptu social spaces where strangers make awkward eye contact while waiting their turn. Crew operations, the invisible workforce. The human effort required to keep an A380 running smoothly is immense. A full crew can number over 24 pilots, flight attendants, and sometimes even onboard chefs, each with their own responsibilities and routines. The cockpit, though packed with technology, is surprisingly compact. The pilot's seats, positioned like thrones overlooking a dashboard of screens and switches. Behind the scenes, the crew rest areas are hidden sanctuaries. Accessed via discrete staircases or hatches, these cramped bunks provide a few precious hours of sleep for crews on ultra-long-haul flights. The contrast is striking. While passengers recline in their seats, a handful of crew members lie in darkened compartments, their rest periods carefully scheduled to ensure they're fresh for the next phase of the journey. The cargo hold, The silent underworld, beneath the passengers' feet, lies another world entirely. The A380's cargo holds are vast, segmented spaces where luggage, freight, and sometimes even live animals travel in pressurized darkness. Loading is a precise science. Each container and pallet must be positioned to maintain the aircraft's balance, with weight distribution calculated down to the kilogram. The sheer volume is difficult to comprehend. In a full passenger configuration, the A380 can carry over 20,000 kilograms of baggage, spread across multiple compartments. The luggage handlers who work these holds move like miners in a cavern, their headlamps cutting through the dim light as they stack suitcases with practiced efficiency. The psychological scale, alone in a crowd, perhaps the most fascinating aspect of the A380's interior is how it plays with human perception of space and solitude. Despite the aircraft's immense size, the individual experience is one of compression. Seats are still just seats, aisles still narrow, personal space still limited. Yet, the knowledge that hundreds of others are sharing the same experience creates a paradoxical sense of community and isolation. Passengers can sit in silence for hours, surrounded by people yet utterly alone, their only connection to the outside world, a tiny window framing clouds far below. The hum of the engines becomes a white noise, a constant reminder of the fragile reality of flight, that this entire human hive is hurtling through the sky at nearly 1,000 kilometers per hour, held aloft by nothing but physics and engineering. Fleeting civilization, every A380 flight is a temporary society, a self-contained ecosystem that exists for only a few hours before dissolving upon landing. The routines, the interactions, the unspoken rules, they all vanish the moment the doors open, leaving behind only traces, crumpled napkins, folded blankets, and the faint smell of recycled air. And yet, for those who pause to consider it, the A380's interior is a triumph not just of engineering, but of human adaptation. It is proof that we can take the most unnatural of environments, a metal tube flying at the edge of space, and fill it with all the complexity, beauty, and occasional frustration of life on the ground. The true test of the A380's monumental scale comes not in flight, but on the ground, where armies of workers, fleets of specialized vehicles, and entire sections of airports have been redesigned to accommodate this airborne titan. Watching an A380 being prepared for departure is like witnessing a meticulously choreographed ballet, where every movement has been perfected to handle an aircraft that redefines the meaning of large. The parking problem, a whale among dolphins even. At rest, the A380 dominates its surroundings. Standard airport parking spots, designed for smaller jets, are hopelessly inadequate. The A380 requires not just a wider berth, but reinforced pavement capable of supporting its maximum weight of over 560,000 kilograms. At major hubs like Dubai or Frankfurt, entire gates have been rebuilt with dual jet bridges to service both decks simultaneously, while the aircraft's wingspan forces adjacent gates to remain empty, lest their own aircraft be dwarfed into insignificance. Towing. The A380 is another spectacle. The standard pushback tugs used for smaller jets would be laughably inadequate. Instead, specialized super tugs with multiple axles and enough torque to move a building are employed. These mechanical beasts latch onto the A380's massive nose gear, their engines roaring as they inch the Colossus backward, a dance requiring millimeter precision to avoid clipping nearby infrastructure. The feeding frenzy, fueling a small town's energy needs. Fueling an A380 is less a refueling stop and more an industrial transfer operation. The aircraft's 320,000-litre fuel capacity could power the average car for over 4 million kilometers, a distance that could circle the Earth 100 times. Tanker trucks, their cylindrical trailers gleaming in the sunlight, queue-like worker ants delivering nectar to a queen. Each truck pumps thousands of liters per minute, yet the process still takes over an hour to complete. The fuel itself is stored in cavernous wing tanks so vast that engineers use ultrasonic sensors to monitor levels as traditional float gauges would be impractical at this scale. During fueling, the wings flex ever so slightly under the weight, a reminder that even this rigid giant must obey the laws of physics. Cargo loading, swallowing freight. Whole while passengers board via the upper decks, beneath their feet unfolds another logistical miracle. The A380's cargo holds are so spacious they could swallow entire shipping containers whole, though in practice, they're filled with a carefully arranged puzzle of luggage pallets and loose items. Loading crews work with military precision, driving specialized high loaders up to the aircraft's belly, their hydraulic platforms rising to meet the cargo doors. Each container is scanned, weighed, and positioned to maintain perfect balance. A miscalculation of just a few hundred kilograms could affect the aircraft's center of gravity. The speed is breathtaking. In under 90 minutes, teams can load 20-plus tons of baggage and freight, transforming empty holds into a tightly packed aluminum-clad warehouse. The cleaning army, a hotel turnover at 30,000 feet between flights. An army of cleaners descends upon the A380 with an efficiency that would put five-star hotels to shame. Every one of its 853 seats must be checked for lost items. Every tray table wiped, every lavatory sanitized. The cleaners move in waves. First the trash collectors, then the vacuum teams, followed by the restock crews who replenish thousands of items. 2,500-plus pillows and blankets, 1,000-plus sets of headphones, enough toilet paper to stretch from the aircraft's nose to tail 3 times over. The upper deck alone can require 30-plus cleaners working simultaneously, their headsets crackling with coordination as they transform a cabin filled with the detritus of human travel into a pristine environment for the next wave of passengers. Engineering checks. A flying hospital's physical while cleaners work inside. Engineers swarm over the A380's exterior like surgeons attending to a sleeping giant. Hydraulic platforms lift them to dizzying heights to inspect the wing's leading edges, where even a minor bird strike could require repairs. The engines, each the size of a small studio apartment, undergo borescope inspections, with cameras snaking through their innards to check for microscopic cracks. Every system is tested. 30+ kilometers of wiring, 1,000+ sensors, 16 main landing gear tires, each inflated to 200+. The checks are so exhaustive that a full A-check maintenance takes 5,000+ labor hours, equivalent to one person working non-stop for 7 months. The human scale revisited, standing on the tarmac during an A380 turnaround. The human role in this operation becomes almost comically disproportionate. Fuelers in high-vis vests look like toy figures next to the landing gear's towering struts. Baggage handlers toss suitcases into holds larger than their apartments. Engineers peer up at wingtips that disappear into the haze of heat rising from the pavement. And yet, this is the A380's ultimate magic trick. For all its inhuman scale, it remains utterly dependent on hundreds of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. The aircraft doesn't just shrink humans, it reveals their collective power to tame the seemingly impossible, the last of their kind. As the boarding call sounds and passengers stream back up the jet bridges, there's a bittersweet undertone to this ground ballet. With production lines closed and airlines retiring A380s early, each turnaround feels increasingly like a relic of a more audacious aviation age. The workers who've spent years mastering this routine know their hard-won expertise may soon become obsolete, But for now, as the super tug disconnects and the first engine spools up, the ground crew steps back to watch their giant take flight once more, leaving behind only tire marks on the tarmac and the lingering smell of jet fuel, fleeting. A proof that humans, for a brief moment, commanded something truly titanic. The sun hangs low over the tarmac, casting long shadows from the Airbus A380's wings, wings that will soon make their final descent. This is not just another flight. It is the end of an era. The world's largest passenger airliner, a machine that once redefined the boundaries of aviation, now prepares for its curtain call. Around it, a quiet army of workers moves with practiced efficiency, each step in the shutdown procedure weighted with unspoken significance. The A380 will never fly again. The final arrival. A giant comes home to rest. The aircraft's last landing is a study in graceful finality. Its massive tires, each capable of withstanding 38 tons of weight, touch the runway one final time, the rubber leaving faint black streaks as they absorb the kinetic energy of a machine the size of a small office building. The reverse thrust roars, a sound that has echoed across runways for nearly 2 decades, now heard for the last time. As the A380 slows to taxi speed, a follow-me car leads it not to a bustling gate, but to a remote corner of the airfield where other retired giants already sit in silent repose, the engines spool down with a sigh. The 4 Rolls-Royce Trent 900s, each once capable of hurling this behemoth across oceans, now fall still. The heat radiating from their exhausts creates shimmering waves in the air, a final mirage before the cold reality of retirement sets. In the draining of life, systems shut down. One by one, ground crews work methodically, turning the A380 from a living, breathing aircraft into an inert shell. Hydraulic fluid is drained, its once pressurized lines now slack. The last drops of jet, fuel, enough to fill a swimming pool at full capacity, are pumped out, leaving the tanks hollow. Electrical systems are powered down, the cockpit's glowing screens blinking off one by one like the closing eyes of a mechanical beast. In the cabin, the air conditioning falls silent, the faint hum that passengers never noticed. The background noise of a machine keeping hundreds alive at 40,000 feet is gone. The overhead bins, once straining with luggage, hang open and empty. A single forgotten boarding pass, crumpled under a seat, is the only evidence of the millions of passengers who once called this place home for a few fleeting hours. The Salvage Symphony, dismantling a legend. The A380's fate is not immediate destruction, but a slow, surgical unbuilding. Teams of engineers and technicians descend upon it, their work resembling archaeologists carefully disassembling a monument. Every component has value. The engines, each worth millions, are detached with cranes and shipped off for refurbishment or resale. The landing gear, built to last tens of thousands of cycles, is inspected and repurposed for other aircraft. The avionics, still state-of-the-art, are carefully catalogued and stored for future use. Even the seats, worn but still serviceable, are stripped out and sold, destined for private collectors, flight simulators, or quirky home offices. The aluminum skin, once polished to a mirror shine, is scanned for stress fractures before being recycled, perhaps to live again as a soda can or a bicycle frame. The empty shell, a cathedral without worshippers, days pass. The A380's interior, once a bustling microcosm of humanity, is now an echoing metal cavern. Footsteps ring hollow in the abandoned cabin. The galleys, where flight attendants once prepared thousands of meals, stand barren. The lavatories, their mirrors still smudged with the fingerprints of the last passengers, no longer smell of disinfectant, just dust. Outside, the wings, still impossibly vast, begin to collect a fine layer of grime. Birds land on them, pecking at insects drawn to the stagnant moisture in the rivet lines. The aircraft's shadow, once a fleeting darkness racing across cities, now sits motionless, growing longer as the sun arcs across the sky. The human element, saying goodbye for the engineers who maintained it, the pilots who commanded it, and the cabin crews who knew its quirks. The A380's retirement is deeply personal. Some run their hands along the fuselage one last time, tracing patches they repaired years ago. Others pose for photos beneath the towering tail, trying to capture a sense of scale that no picture can truly convey. A veteran captain, who once guided this aircraft across hundreds of oceans, stands silently in the cockpit. The yoke, now locked in place, will never again respond to his touch. The switches, once alive with purpose, are frozen in the off position. He flicks one out of habit. Nothing happens. The last comparison, a giant among meners. The sun sets on the A380's final day in one piece. A curious thing happens. The workers, the humans who built, flew and maintained this machine, gather near its nose. From this angle, the aircraft's sheer size is undeniable. Its nose gear alone towers over them. Its cockpit windows, dark and empty, stare down like the eyes of a fallen titan. And yet in this moment, the true scale of the A380 is measured not in meters or tons, but in human achievement. Every curve of its wings, every line of its code, every safety system and passenger amenity was conceived, designed, and perfected by people. People who dared to ask, what if we built something bigger? The legacy, bigger than metal. The A380's story does not end in a scrapyard. Its legacy lives on in every double-deck airport gate, in every pilot trained to handle wide-body behemoths, in every child who looked up and gasped at its impossible size. It proved that humans could build flying cities, and for a brief, glorious window of time we did. As the last pieces are hauled away, one truth remains. The A380 never made humans feel small. It made us feel capable. And somewhere in a hangar in Toulouse, the very first A380 ever built sits preserved, its doors open to visitors. A father lifts his son onto his shoulders, letting him touch the weathered Airbus logo on the fuselage. "This," he says, "is how big dreams used to be."